Snow fell like sifted flour that morning, soft and slow, covering the ridge in silence. The world was the color of ashes, gray sky, gray smoke, gray soul. And somewhere between the whispering pines and the groan of a half-frozen creek, a woman moved through the cold like a secret. Her name was Clara May Hensley, though she hadn't heard anyone speak it kindly in months. She'd walked all night from town, boots leaking, belly hollow, fingers raw. The wind scraped her cheeks until they stung red, but she didn't stop. Hunger is a cruel guide. It doesn't let you think, only survive. And when she reached the cabin by the ridge, a lonely thing built from thick logs and solitude, she smelled something that nearly broke her heart. Eggs. The hens were clucking somewhere behind the cabin. Their sound was warm, alive, promising life. She crept to the small coop, the boards creaking under her weight. Inside, the air was faintly sweet, filled with feathers and straw. Her breath shook as she reached into a nest and felt the smooth shell of an egg, still warm. She slipped it into her apron pocket. Then another, and another. Her hands trembled so hard one cracked. The yolk slid between her fingers, yellow against her cold skin. She bit her lip, swallowing down a sob. It wasn't just hunger, it was shame, deep and thick as mud. Once, she'd sold bread with her father at the market. Once, she'd been a wife. Once, she'd had a name people said without smirking. Then came the laughter. The whispers. Too soft, they said. Too slow. Too much of her. Her husband had left after 6 weeks, saying he needed a woman who didn't eat more than a man. Now here she was, stealing eggs in another man's yard, praying he wouldn't hear. But then came the sound, boots crushing snow behind her. Heavy, certain. She froze, breath catching. The hens went still too, as if even they were afraid that a man's voice broke the silence, low and calm as a warning. Stealing from me, huh? She turned slowly. The figure before her looked carved from the mountain itself, broad shoulders beneath a wool coat, dark beard dusted with snow, eyes as gray as the storm. A rifle rested easy in his hand, though he hadn't raised it yet. Her lips parted. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean, Mayonine, don't change the doing. His tone wasn't cruel, but steady, judging, but not like the town did. It was the kind of judgment that came from pain, not pride. She bowed her head, her voice small. I'll go. I'll put him back. He watched her a long moment, wind rustling the trees around them. Then, finally, he asked, would you rather be punished once or forever? The question stopped her. She looked up, confused. I don't understand. His gaze didn't waver. Once means I'll make you pay and send you on your way. Forever means I'll let you stay, work for what you took, till you earn more than you stole. Her throat tightened. You'd let me stay? Not for free. He leaned his rifle against the coop and stepped closer. You'll feed the hens. Split wood. Keep the fire alive. You do it honest, and that'll be your punishment. She nodded, trembling. She would have agreed to anything, but he turned, motioning her toward the cabin. She hesitated before following, half afraid it was a trick, half afraid it wasn't. Inside, the place smelled of smoke, pine, and the faint sweetness of old whiskey. A pot of stew cooled on the hearth. He moved with the slowness of a man used to silence. Sit, he said, pointing to a stool by the fire. She did, awkwardly clutching her apron. Her stomach growled so loud she wanted to cry. He poured black coffee into a tin cup and handed it to her. The cup burned her fingers, but she didn't let go. That he watched her a moment, then finally spoke. Name? Clara, she said quietly. Clara May. He nodded. Jonas Weller. The name fit him, simple, hard, no edges left soft. He sat across the fire, the flames painting his face in orange and shadow. For a long time neither spoke. The only sound was the hiss of burning wood and the soft cluck of a hen outside. When she finally whispered, why didn't you send me away? He didn't look up. 'Cause I seen worse than hunger. And folks who never got the chance to work it off. There was something in his voice, an ache, heavy and old. She wondered what ghosts he carried, what he'd lost out here in the cold. That he stood, setting his cup down. There's stew in the pot. Eat slow. She rose on shaking legs and ladled a small bowl. The warmth hit her like sunlight. Tears welled up uninvited, but she turned her face from him so he wouldn't see. Jonas went to the door, staring out into the gray beyond. His silhouette looked lonely, even with her there as she ate. She thought of the strange mercy in his question, punished once or forever. Maybe this was her chance to stop living forever in shame. Outside, the wind began to howl again, rattling the cabin's shutters. She shivered, but for the first time in a long while, not from the cold. Jonas spoke softly without turning around. You can sleep in the corner by the stove. Tomorrow, we start early. She nodded. Yes, sir. He almost smiled, just a flicker. Don't call me sir. Makes me sound older than I feel. The faintest warmth crept into her chest, almost laughter. Almost. She lay down that night wrapped in an old quilt, the fire whispering low. The cabin creaked like it remembered other winters. Jonas's shadow moved slowly as he poured water into the kettle. His motions steady, precise that eye in the dark. Clara whispered to herself, maybe this is what punishment feels like when the world stops trying to hurt you. Jonas heard her, though he said nothing. His eyes lingered on the fire until they softened, remembering a boy named Eli, his brother, whose grave still sat half-buried on the ridge. For the first time in years, he said a quiet prayer, not for himself, but for the thief asleep beside his fire. Outside, the storm deepened. Inside, something fragile and human began to thaw. The days settled into rhythm, quiet and steady as the snow that never stopped falling. Morning came pale and silver, the kind of light that made everything look half-dreamed. Clara woke early, her breath white in the cold air, and fed the hens before dawn. Their feathers brushed her hands like forgiveness. Jonas spoke little. He'd hand her a tool or point toward the woodpile, and that was all. But somehow, the silence between them grew easier to stand and first. Her body ached. The axe bit deep into the logs, but not as deep as the ache in her shoulders. Her palms blistered, then bled, then hardened. And every night when she sank by the fire, too tired to cry, Jonas would pour her a cup of black coffee and say, "You did all right today." That was his way of saying thank you. By the second week, she'd stopped thinking of herself as a thief. She'd begun to feel, if not forgiven, then at least useful. One morning, she found a small bag of flour in the pantry, and on instinct, she baked. Her hands moved without thought, kneading dough like she used to back in her father's bakery. When the bread came out golden, the smell filled the cabin, warm, sweet, like memory itself. Jonas came in from the cold, snow in his beard, stopped in the doorway. "What's this?" "Bread," she said shyly, brushing flour off her dress. "Didn't mean to use what's yours." He tore a piece, tasted it slow. "Ain't tasted anything like this since before the war." She smiled faintly. "Guess you've been punishing yourself a while, too." He looked up, something flickering in his eyes. "Reckon I have." They ate in silence, the sound of the fire popping between them. When they rode into town a week later for supplies, she stayed close behind him, trying not to draw eyes. But Mrs. Dunn saw her first, peering out the window of her general store like a crow spotting shiny trouble. "Well, well," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "If it isn't Jonas Weller with his new house girl. Thought you liked living alone up there, Jonas." Jonas ignored her. He placed a bag of coffee beans on the counter, counted his coins. Clara kept her eyes down, but whispers rippled like wind through dry grass. When they stepped outside, she could feel the town's eyes pressing against her back, mocking, pitying, cruel. She whispered, "They think I'm, let him think." Jonas interrupted, calm but firm. "Town don't know the first thing about truth." She blinked hard to hold back tears. "Still hurts." He nodded. "Then hold your head higher. Don't give him the pleasure." On the ride home, she didn't speak, but she sat a little straighter. The days grew shorter. The cold sharpened until even breath felt like glass. They worked side by side mending the fence, their movements slow but sure. Sometimes, Jonas would tell her about his brother, Eli, the one he couldn't save from a fever 2 winters back. His voice would drop to a whisper when he spoke his name. "He was the last person I tried to take care of," Jonas said one evening, staring into the fire. "Guess I didn't much feel like trying again after that." Clara's voice was soft. "You were trying, though, right now." He looked up. "You Callan feed in hens trying?" She smiled faintly. "I call it something like mercy." He didn't answer, but something loosened in his chest. That night, Clara woke to coughing. Jonas sat hunched near the fire, face pale, sweat on his brow. When she touched his arm, he burned like the stove iron. "Jonas," she whispered, "you're fevered." He tried to wave her off. just tired. But the wound on his hand, the one from splitting wood, was red and swollen. She cleaned it, wrapped it, changed the cloth every hour. When he muttered deliriously about Eli, she held his hand until the shaking stopped. "Don't you dare go dying on me," she whispered. "Not after all this." Outside, the storm howled against the walls. The wind sounded almost alive, pressing at the cabin, testing its strength. But inside, Clara stayed up all night by the fire, eyes heavy, whispering to keep herself awake. When dawn came, he was still breathing. The fever broke. She leaned her head against the edge of the cot and cried, not out of fear, but out of something like relief. Jonas woke to the sound of her quiet sobs. He blinked slowly, voice hoarse. "You been watching me all night." She nodded, wiping her face. "You saved me once. I just returned the favor." He managed a weak smile. "Guess that makes us even." She shook her head. "No, it don't." Their eyes met across the small space between them, the firelight painting gold on tired faces. There was no grand declaration, no kiss, no sudden promise. Just two souls sitting in the quiet, bound by something wordless and good. Jonas looked toward the window. Snow drifted sideways across the glass, the kind that never really stops falling. "You can go, if you want," he said softly. "When the weather clears. You've done your part." Clara turned back to the fire. "Maybe I will," she whispered. "But not tonight." He nodded, eyes closing again. For the first time, he slept easy, and as the cabin filled with soft light, Clara realized her punishment had turned into something far gentler: work, warmth, and the strange peace that comes from being needed again. The storm outside raged on, but inside the little cabin on the ridge, two lost souls shared a fragile calm that felt, somehow, like hope. The thaw came slow that year. Snow melted into mud, mud turned to earth, and the ridge began to breathe again. The hens clucked louder in the mornings. The air smelled of pine and wet soil instead of frost. And for the first time since she could remember, Clara felt the strange rhythm of belonging. Her hands busy, her heart quiet. Jonas's fever left him thin and tired, but not broken. He moved slower now, with a limp that hadn't been there before, though he never complained. She caught him watching her sometimes, when she carried water, when she hummed while hanging clothes to dry, when she smiled without realizing it. And when their eyes met, he always looked away first, as if afraid to believe it was real. One morning, she found him sitting on the porch whittling a small piece of wood. His rough hands worked careful as prayer. "What's that?" she asked. "Don't know yet," he said. "Guess I'll see what it wants to be." That was Jonas all over. Quiet, deliberate, letting things reveal themselves in their own time. But peace never lasts long in the Wild West. Not when gossip can ride faster than a horse. It was near sundown when they heard hooves in the valley. Jonas stepped off the porch, hand resting on his rifle. A lone rider climbed the hill. Deputy Kane, young and proud, the kind of man who wore his badge like armor. "Jonas Weller," he shouted. "I hear you've been harboring a thief up here." Clara froze by the henhouse. Her stomach dropped. She'd thought the world had forgotten her name, but apparently not. Jonas's jaw tightened. "Ain't no thief here. Just a woman earning her keep." Kane dismounted, boots splashing in the thawing mud. "Law says theft's theft. Ain't up to you to decide what's forgiven." Jonas's tone went cold. "And what would you know about forgiveness, boy?" Kane's hand hovered near his revolver. "You're obstructing justice." Before he could take another step, Clara stepped forward. Her voice shook, but she made herself stand tall. "If you're here for me, then take me. But you'll have to do it while I'm standing." The words echoed in the open air. Jonas glanced at her, proud and pained at once. Kane hesitated, caught off guard by her calm. "You confessin'? I stole 3 eggs," she said. "And I've been paying for it ever since, with my hands, my breath, and every sunrise. Ain't no more debt left to pay." The deputy's face faltered. Something human flickered there. "Law don't." A sudden crash cut him off. The wind had caught a hanging lantern on the porch, knocking it into the doorframe. Flames raced up the dry boards before anyone could move. "Fire!" Jonas shouted. He and Kane rushed forward, but the blaze spread fast, devouring the cabin like it had been waiting all winter for the chance. Jonas coughed, covering his mouth with his sleeve. "Clara, get the hens out." She ran through the smoke, coughing hard, her apron shielding her face. She kicked open the coop, her heart pounding. The birds fluttered into the open air as the heat built behind her. Jonas stumbled near the door, half blinded. The fire had found the ceiling beams, roaring overhead. He reached for his rifle leaning by the wall, but the roof cracked above him, sending a rain of sparks and timber. Jonas! Clara screamed, lunging through the smoke. She grabbed his arm, dragging with all her weight. His body was heavy, his boots slipping in the ash, but she didn't let go. The deputy ran forward to help, pulling them both clear just as the roof came down in a storm of cinders. The fire leapt into the sky, red against the dying sun. Jonas collapsed on the ground, gasping. Clara dropped beside him, her face streaked with soot and tears. "Don't you ever scare me like that again," she whispered, voice shaking. He coughed a laugh, eyes glinting through the smoke. "Guess we'll have to build it all over again." Clara wiped her face. "Maybe that's the point." Kane looked between them, uncertain now, his authority burned away by what he'd just seen. I'll report the debt settled," he said finally, voice low. "World's got bigger sinners than folks who share eggs." Then he mounted his horse and rode back down the ridge, his figure swallowed by dusk when the fire finally died. Only ashes and the faint smell of smoke remained. The cabin was gone, but the world around it felt strangely lighter, as if something old and haunted had burned away too. Jonas sat in the mud, turning something small over in his hands, the piece of wood he'd been carving that morning. He brushed the ash off and held it out to her. It was shaped like an egg, smooth and simple. A little crude, but beautiful in its own way. He placed it in her palm. "For what was stolen," he said softly. "And what got returned?" She looked down at it, then up at him. "You didn't have to." "Yeah," he said. "I did." They stood there in silence as the sun slipped behind the ridge, painting the sky in gold and ember. The smoke curled upward like a prayer, and for once, neither of them felt small beneath it. "Jonas?" she said finally. What happens now?" He smiled faintly, looking at the blackened hill where the cabin used to be. "We start again. This time, we build something that lasts." She nodded. "Together?" "Together." By spring, the ridge was green again. New logs stacked by hand, a new roof rising from ruin. Jonas built the frame, Clara painted the shutters. At dusk they'd sit side by side, watching the light fade over the hills, the silence between them no longer heavy but whole. People from town came once or twice, bringing tools or gossip, but none stayed long. They said Jonas Weller had gone soft, that the thief had bewitched him. Jonas only smiled and kept hammering, and when the last board was nailed and the hens returned to their new coop, Jonas took a deep breath of warm evening air. "You done your time, Clara May. You can go if you want." She looked at the horizon, then at him. "I reckon I already did go once. Didn't find much worth keeping out there." He nodded, a soft smile touching the corners of his mouth. That night, as the wind whispered through the fresh pine beams, Clara placed the carved wooden egg on the mantel. It caught the light from the fire, glowing faintly gold. The narrator's voice drifts in, slow as an old man by the fire. "Mercy's a strange thing. It don't shout, it don't judge. It just waits, quiet, patient, as long as it takes for two broken souls to notice it sitting between them. Some folks think forgiveness is a gift you give to others. Truth is, it's the only way to save yourself." Outside, the stars shimmered over the rebuilt cabin, the smoke rising straight and steady. Jonas leaned against the doorframe, watching Clara hum to the hens. His rough hands hung loose by his sides. No rifle, no anger, just peace, and the old soul's voice faded into the night. "She came as a thief, and he is a man guarding what little he had left. But mercy turned thieves to builders, and punishment to love. And in that quiet corner of the frontier, two hearts learned that forgiveness, once given, never truly ends." The wind sighed across the ridge. The world, for a moment, felt healed.